Welcome to the show. I am extremely excited to have special guest Molly Sider on the show. Molly, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff.
You are so welcome. So let's get right into your hidden edge. I love it. I can't wait to unpack this identity, right? And being able to step into that in any situation. Would love the backstory. I think that's so important for the audience to kind of learn the lessons that we've gone through and cultivating that hidden edge of identity. So would love the backstory on it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many avenues that led me to actually figuring out who I am at my core. But some examples would be like I can remember when I was dating a lot and I would show up as this like really confident, cool, funny, fun person, attractive, like not a care in the world. Um, and then I can remember a time where like that feeling would switch because maybe I realized I really liked the person and I felt like, oh, I have something to lose here. And all of a sudden I'd get really shy and I'd get really insecure and I wouldn't know what to talk about. And my opinions went out the window. Um, and I would recognize this in myself, like, why do I do this? What I think I'm actually this other person, and I'm showing up as this thing that I'm not so proud of, and that was always the time when like the relationship would go down the tubes.
Okay.
Um, and I can also remember times like at work, I'd make a mistake and I would like ruminate on this mistake all day long. I'd think about it. And I knew like no one else is thinking about this anymore. Like move on with your day. But I couldn't get past it. And I was so fearful that like what all of this meant about me and who I am as a person. Um, all of the fears about and beliefs that I held so tight um as to like, was I worthy enough? Was I smart enough? Was I attractive enough? Um and that all of these like moments, all this ruminating and the dating and all that stuff was sort of like proving that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't worthy, that I wasn't lovable, that I wasn't attractive enough. And it got to a point where I was like, I need to do something about this. I need to do something to feel better, to suffer less. I don't want to
Okay.
suffer anymore. and and I realized somehow that, you know, the thing that I can do, the thing that I had control over was me.
Okay.
And so I started to do a lot of like, very heavy lifting, like personal growth work, which was hard and scary and not fun at times, and also really empowering at times.
Yep.
Um, and one of the things that I started doing was telling stories. So I took storytelling classes.
Okay.
So like Moth style. Have you ever listened to the Moth?
I have not.
Um, it's a show on NPR. It's also you can listen. You can go in person like across the nation in any city where you can go and you can listen to people tell true personal narrative stories on stages.
Okay.
Anyway, I got into storytelling. I took a class here in Chicago, and then I took another class, and I got up on stages and I started telling these stories and about myself, which was also really scary. I also have a background. I was a creative writing major in college, and I was this really, really, really shy, like painfully shy child, um, and had sort of taken on that identity as an adult. But um, I also loved to be on stage. I was a dancer and like took singing and acting classes. So there was like this little bit of like this disconnect, like being on a stage was like somehow comfortable.
Hmm.
Um, Anyway, so that was just a little background as to why I was like, "Ooh, storytelling might be my medium." And
Gotcha.
what ended up happening when I started telling stories was I started telling really personal stories, really getting really vulnerable, scary stuff,
Hmm.
and not easy. And I'm not saying that everyone has to do this, but this was my experience. Was I started creating connections with other people in the audience. People were like, "Thank you for telling that story. I've felt that way before. What an important story to tell." I started realizing like, oh, I'm not the only person in the room who's felt this way,
Yep.
and it was empowering to me and healing to me, and it was also empowering to other people. And um, that's a lot of the reason why I started my podcast, was because I was like approaching the age of 40, and I was like, I was single, I've never had kids. I, was in a good career that I liked, but I also wasn't making nearly enough money or as much money as people were telling me that I was supposed to be making at that age. Um, and I was like, "Did I miss my chance for quote, success in life?" And I needed to hear stories from other people who have maybe been through what I have been through so that I knew that I would be okay. And as I started, like, diving into, the storytelling piece, diving into who I am and how I like to show up to the world, I started to think like, "Okay, something would happen, there'd be a conflict, or, I'd make a mistake at work." And I would think rather than ruminating on it, or I would start to ruminate on it, and then I would catch myself and I'd be like,
Mhm.
did I try my hardest? Was I honest? And was I kind about it?" And that sort of became my North Star a little bit.
Okay.
Um, and I realized that, like, if I could say yes to those things, then I could move on. I could let it go. Like, I'm not perfect, I'm human, and, I could let it go. And then from there, I started realizing, like, wait a second. So if I could do this sort of after the fact,
Mhm.
maybe I could solve this upstream.
Okay.
So maybe I could figure out, like, ahead of time, how do I wanna show up before I get to the whatever situation? Um, and that requires me to, get a little bit or required me to get a little bit more in depth about, like, well, who am I? Like, how do I wanna show up to the world? What are my values? What do I care
Yep.
about the most?
Yep.
And I started to sort of pick apart, like, who I am. Well, like, I'm honest and I like to be kind. Obviously, I had said those 2 things. Um, I'm also, I'm super curious. I ask a lot of questions. I always
Okay.
have.
Yeah.
You are the same. That's why we have podcasts.
Right.
Um, um, and I think for a really, really long time, I thought that that was, I was as certainly as a kid, I would ask all these questions and I was always told, like, "Stop asking, you're annoying me." And I thought that that meant that I was, like, asking stupid questions or, um, I was annoying, I wasn't worthy, I wasn't good at whatever it was. Like,
Right.
I stopped for a really long time, and then I realized, like, "Wait a second, I'm curious, and that's a good thing." And even just sitting down and asking somebody questions at, like, a dinner table, like, I could witness people feel like I there was, like, an exchange of, like, energy when you sit down and you really ask lots of curious questions and you give somebody all of the attention,
Yep.
and, like, that makes people feel, empowered and amazing and seen and heard, and I could watch that sort of happening in other people, and I was like, "This is fun, and this feels good, and actually, this is a really good quality that I'm proud of having." I'm an empath. I started learning about what that means. So I was always, like, super, super sensitive. I thought that was people would tell me, "Oh, you're too sensitive, you're too sensitive." And then I started diving into, like, okay, what does that mean? Why am I so sensitive? I started learning what an empath is. And I was like, "Oh, wait a second. I think this is my superpower, and I'm going to embrace this." So slowly I started, like, you know, picking up the pieces of, like, who am I at my core?
Mhm.
And is that good? Am I proud of it? How do I make this work for me in this world? And, it's going to be ever changing, obviously, as
Right.
I learn through the world. But um now when somebody's like, "Who are you? What is your identity?" I'm like, "Well, I'm kind, I'm honest, I'm curious, um, and I'm empathetic, and I'm funny, and I'm creative." I don't know. I'm
Right.
those things. So moving back to, like, okay, solving this upstream, now I'm like, if I'm faced with a conflict, if I'm faced with some sort of situation where I'm scared and I'm coming on this podcast and I'm nervous, whatever it is, the way that I center myself now is like, okay, well, I know who I am. I'm
Mhm.
kind of curious. I'm compassionate, empathetic, creative, and I know how to be all of those things at my core. I'm confident about that, if nothing else. And that's all I have to do. Like, I have to come onto this podcast, and all I have to do is be those things. That's it. And immediately, like, all my fears and my insecurities and all the things, like, kind of fall away if I'm in a
Mhm.
conflict with somebody. If somebody's angry with me or whatever it is, or I'm angry with them, I can take a breath and center myself and be like, "Okay, how do you wanna show up in this moment?" It's always those things. It's always, like,
Right.
who I am to my core. So, that's what I mean as for my identity, and it's not like what my successes are, what my failures are, what my relationship status is, what my status is as a parent. Like none of
Mhm.
that, those are things that we have and those are great things. And they're it's information to help us figure out actually who we are at our core. And the really, important part, the most important part about this, maybe I don't know, one of the most important parts about this is that once you understand that, if you lose a job or if you break up with your partner or, whatever happens, you don't lose yourself.
Mm.
Not saying that that's not hard. Those things will
Right.
be hard and hurtful, and you'll go through all sorts of emotions. We're human. And, so many people, when they like break up with a partner, they're like, you know, wandering around like, I'm lost. I've lost
Right.
myself. I've lost my identity. My identity was so tied up with that other person. And it's like, no, this is who you are. That's something you had and you lost and you have to mourn that and figure that out. But you can do that while accessing who you are at your core. So
Gotcha. No, couple questions to follow up on that, and points that I heard was, you know, identity through values or virtues, right? So important to do and to define and to ask yourself those difficult questions. And so many times we don't ask ourselves any questions. I'd say 99% of the population doesn't ask themselves questions on a daily basis, like
mm,
who am I, or what do I want, or you know those types of things. So that was number one. Number two, feelings. When you define your identity and live by those values, that replaces the feelings. All of a sudden, you were just mentioning like, hey, if you had some nerves, wait, I'm going to show up in these 5, 6 ways that I know I'm powerful when I show up that way.
mhm.
Then all of a sudden you're ready to step into it. Excuse me. Identity is just, it's so important, I feel, because we've been taught when we're younger, well, how do you feel? And it's no fault of our parents. That's just, well, how do you feel? Well, I don't feel great today. Okay, well, don't do what you want to do. Just take it easy. Well, what happens? We don't feel like doing things a lot of the times in our days, and we don't take actions, and then we spiral downwards. So for somebody that's struggling with identity, doesn't know who they are, what are one or two powerful questions that are just fundamental in asking themselves, and they can repeat that question over and over again to start to build that identity of who they are?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I love that you brought up talking to your kids who are like, I don't feel great today, and sort of leaving it at that, because I think we can do this, with our children and with ourselves and anyone. Um, how am I feeling today? What am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm not feeling great. Why? Why am I not feeling great?
Right.
I mean, it's just as simple as that. What is it that I want to feel? What is it that I would rather be feeling and why? Like the why is always the like most important piece, right? Because you could say like, oh, I feel tired, or oh, I'm feeling sad. Well, sad is like this like huge all-encompassing, descriptor. It doesn't tell
Mm.
me really anything. So, okay, what does sad mean to you? Why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling sad about this specific circumstance? How would I rather feel about it? Why would I rather feel that way? And what might I do? What might I need to do to get to that feeling? Simple, like break it down really simply, and journal on it, or talk to a friend, or talk to your coach or therapist, your partner, whomever, somebody you feel safe with. Um, and and start, actually, it's so hard, it's so scary. We are taught, certainly in this society, to not talk about ourselves, to hold our emotions and our feelings inside, don't burden anybody.
Mhm.
It's a sign of weakness. Like, no, let that all go. If you like, one of my biggest mottos, if you like were to go to my website, I write like, you we cannot do life alone. We're
Yep.
not supposed to do life alone. And once you really get that and you believe it, what a relief.
Mm.
The biggest, the fastest way to calming our nervous system what is that? It's not, taking a drug or drinking a glass of wine. It's interpersonal communication, right? Just
Mm,
talking to somebody. "Hey,
yes.
I'm feeling such and such way right now, and I'm feeling a little embarrassed about saying this out loud. It's actually kind of scary to say this out loud, but I think I need to say it." Um, whatever it is. It's immediately calming to the nervous system.
It's so powerful. Yeah, and it's amazing that you said that because I just read something that there was a study and it was basically somebody going in for like a test related to cancer. And when they went in by themselves or their heart rate was elevated, they could just tell that their brain activity was very elevated. When they were holding the hand of even a stranger, it decreased their heart rate, it decreased their brain activity because it was that connection, right? That you're speaking to right there. And I am on the same wavelength of you related to asking for help. And I
Mhm.
come from the male side of the fence, and men especially,
Yeah.
uh, asking for help. It's a weakness. No, it's
Mhm.
actually a strength. I mean, so many of the trials and tribulations I've been through could have been stopped before I did it by asking for help with
Mhm.
somebody. And I think to your point, we need to say we're all connected. We're all going through this human experience, this human journey. We're all battling that 6 inches in between our ears. Ask, talk to somebody, be vulnerable. You're going to connect at such a deeper level, and it's going to your point, your energy, you're just going to feel it, and it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my god, I just got chills when you told that story. But it's so true, and, I talk about storytelling all the time and how important it is for us to share our stories and listen to other people share their stories. And, what I mean by that really, because people are like, "Storytelling, I don't have any stories to tell." A, yes, you do. We're all
Right.
just a bunch of stories. That's all we do, literally all we do.
Yep.
You and I are sharing stories right now. When you call your friend up on the phone, like, you tell them a story around the dinner table, whatever. But what I really mean is just talking about yourself. Like, it's not just okay to talk about yourself. It is imperative. You have to do it. And if that scares you, it's normal, super normal. Um, again, like, we are taught not to talk about ourselves. We are taught not to share our emotions. Um, but um, it's normal, and it will immediately, like, once you first of all, you can start by saying, if you're scared, pick the person or journal about it and literally say, "I'm scared right now. This is
Mhm.
scary. This is unfamiliar. I don't really know how this is gonna come out. It might sound a little bit wobbly, and that's normal, and that's okay." But do it. But do it anyway, and do it in whatever way that you can, because you're gonna, like you said, you create this connection. You realize that you're not the only person in the world feeling the way that you're feeling.
Mhm.
I often say we are, unique in our details, not so much in our fears and insecurities and emotions. Like, most likely, whatever you're feeling, someone else in the room is also feeling or has felt at some point.
Right.
And the minute that we, like, understand that we create that connection, like, what a relief that is. It's like
Mhm.
all this energy that we've spent hiding who we are and what we're thinking and what we're feeling, because we're afraid that if we let it out, that the world will reflect back to us, what we've always feared about ourselves, the stories we've always told about, I'm bad, I'm
Mhm.
unworthy, I'm not lovable, whatever it is. When in reality, what ends up happening every time, and I challenge every listener to try this some way, is that you create a connection with somebody else who's like, wow, I felt that way before.
Right.
That really sucks. And how light it becomes, and how much it's like, okay, now I don't have to spend so much energy. Like, I've let that out. I don't have to spend so much energy, like, hiding. And I can now use that extra energy to focus on what I really want to do with my life and who I really want to be. It's like energy is like currency. You
Mhm.
know, it's precious. Be careful how you spend it.
It's so true. Energy is so missed by people, they don't understand how to cultivate it, how to bring it out, and how to be around others that are operating at a high energy level, and how it can just continue to inspire, motivate, all of those good things. Back to the identity, is there, when you start your day, do you define your identity during that process, or do you just call it out throughout the day? I mean, I know what I do personally. I mean, I define my identity every morning and the values and virtues I'm going to live with, because that allows me to step forward into that identity versus, hey, if I don't feel it on a particular day, let's say working out, I define myself from an identity perspective as a world-class athlete. Well, world-class athletes, if they don't feel it, they still do it, right? So I get past that. Do you do it? When do you do it, and how often do you do it throughout your day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to touch on that, like, yes, you're a world-class athlete, but what is the reason? Like, I would argue that your identity isn't that you're a world-class athlete. It's that you're, whatever it is that motivates you to become a world-class, that you're motivated, and you're, whatever it is. So that, when you're 90 and you maybe can still be an athlete, but maybe not at the level you are right now, you haven't lost your identity. You still have you're still the same person, with the same values, and you can still show up to the world at the same level, just maybe not like, I don't know, jumping over tires or whatever it is.
I'm going to do that as long as I can. There you go.
Yes, absolutely. Do that as long as you can. And at some point, if something were to happen, if you were to break your leg and you couldn't do it for, 4 months, like, what happens to that identity? So that's what I would say about that. But for me, and I love that you get up every morning and you're like, who am I? And that's such a great way to start the day. I don't do that. Maybe I should start thinking about it. I'm going to consider this. For me, it's most helpful, like when I'm about to go into a situation that I'm afraid of, or is feeling whatever, making me feel, some sort of icky way. And then I stop and I'm like, okay, who am I? And how do I want to show up in this situation? And what does that look like? Because usually it's the same answer. I'm like, oh, I want to show up with kindness and honesty and curiosity and vulnerability, whatever. Okay, but what does that look like here? Because it's going to look different here than it did yesterday.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think that's a great lesson, an example to give the audience, where they can, once they've asked themselves those difficult questions, then they know, hey, when you feel that ickiness, that angst, hey, this is how I'm going to show up in this particular situation. And then that allows you to step into that identity and move forward. So I've loved the discussion. I'm sure the listeners have gotten plenty of value from it. Molly, where can people find you? Where can they look you up?
Yeah, this was so great. Thank you for this. So you can find me on my website, mollysider.com. My last name is spelled with an S rather than a C, but like apple cider. And if you want to work with me, you can set up like a consultation there through the website, and of course, catch my podcast, I Am This Age, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome.
Which Molly, Jeff will be on at some point.
I will. I can't wait to have a great discussion on your podcast, Molly. Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Create a legendary day. Rise, fight, love, repeat. Get after it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to your Hidden Edge podcast. You are now part of the movement, part of a tribe who's on a mission to uncover their hidden edge. We're stronger together, so please share this. Show up with one person in your network that you want to help. Together, we can empower others, and connected, we can make a dent in the universe.